Well, hello, I'm Roy Lilly, and I'm with Tim Elwell Sutton from the Health Foundation. And Tim was a lead author in chapter, I better get this right, chapter 3
That's right.
of the CMO's fabulous report that we're featuring in this whole series of movies. I think it was called Local Health Environment or something snappy, wasn't it?
That's right,
What?
yeah.
What? Something simple. Right. Tell me what were you trying to encapsulate in the chapter?
So I think for us, it was about something aspirational about what could we do if we put health at the heart of all policy. So actually, when you talk to people about what's important to them, they put health right up there at the top. You know, they say it's more important to them in income than education and career. And sort of, if you follow that rationale, you should really have health as a central preoccupation for all of government. And we don't feel it is there. And I think one of the reasons for that is that we focus a lot on health as an absence of illness, and so we focus a lot on healthcare. And actually, I believe that long-term, real improvements in population health will come from creating healthier environments. So giving people the right conditions to lead healthy lives, and generally the evidence is when you do that, people live long, healthy, productive lives with less time in poor health.
It's absolutely overwhelming. I mean, the health status of people is a theme that runs like the stripe in the toothpaste through the report, doesn't it? Population health. And it's clear deprivation, all of that stuff, it really mitigates against people leading healthier lives, which causes costs, disruption to the economy and so on. So what is, I mean, I think we all kind of get that it's a good idea, but what is the fulcrum point? What's the change maker? What have we got to do? Because this report looks to 2040, isn't it? What will we have had to have done by 2040?
So I think it's about, a lot of this is about getting it right at the level of place, at the level of the locality. I think there's a lot that central government can do, and there's a lot that can be done nationally. But I think that has to create the right environment for local leadership to flourish.
When you say local leadership, you have, I mean, I used to be a local authority councillor, and of course, you can do very little as a local authority, really, because it's constrained by government, your expenditure constrained, you're limited in what you can do. So does it require government to sort of change its whole attitude to local government? I think it regards local government as a bit of a nuisance, really.
Yeah, I think that may be the case, and I think for me it's not just about local government. Local government is central as a convener, but I think the private sector has a part to play, and I think the voluntary and community sector has a part to play. But I think local government is central as a kind of convener around that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, over recent years, not only is local government constrained by a lot of regulation, but actually the funding has been cut so drastically that all people in local government can do is think about the next step, the next day.
But they've had their budgets cut, and if you look at they can now raise their local precept to put up to 3% into social care. But of course, the areas where that precept is more needed, desperately needed, are generally the poorer areas where the business precept doesn't really contribute a great deal.
Well, that's right, and also if you look at beyond social care spend, I mean, it's been about a 30% cut over recent years in other areas of funding for local government. And in that environment, it's very difficult for local government to really invest long term in creating healthy places. So there's three things that we said in this chapter. One is we need kind of to expand our view of what health is, and it's not just about absence of illness, it's an asset that we should be investing in. We need to expand our view of how we intervene, so no longer just picking off sort of individual issues too late in the day. We need to think about how do we create an early stage, a healthy system. And the other thing is we need to expand our view of what success looks like. Success isn't just increasing GDP. Success is people leading healthier lives. Success is better well-being. And until we have that at the heart of our policy making, actually, I think we'll continue to make short-term decisions which harm health in the long run.
They do. And if you look at, some of the policies that have worked in the past, Sure Start, for example, that worked. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, we don't. And the kind of successor to that, children's centres, So if you look, there's a really good graph. I'll just do a plug. There's a good graph in our chapter on children's services.
It's full
spending.
of good graphs.
Yeah, it's got good.
Great graphics.
So I love the one on children's services spending. So over a 5-year period, 9% less spent on children's services, but actually at the acute end, so children in need and children taken into care, spending's actually gone up 10%.
Yeah.
And at the preventative end, including things like children's centres, it's down 40%.
Yeah,
So
and mental health for children.
Exactly. So it's not just we're spending less; we're spending at the acute end rather than the preventative end.
So how do we? I don't know what the word is. How do we change gear? How do we alter the thinking? I mean, to anybody who studies this stuff and writes so well about it as you do and your colleagues have done in this chapter. What happens to the politics? How do we, because at the end of the day it's politics, how do we do that?
Well, there's some interesting opportunities coming up. So Secretary of State has talked about producing a prevention green paper this year, and I think it's really good to hear him talking about prevention.
Do you think they'll do it? I mean, there's a desperate one on social care, isn't there?
Well, there is, and there are other things occupying our politicians' minds at the moment. I understand that. Apparently,
I don't think what that is.
So I'm told.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's highlighted prevention is really good. But I think the work we're doing and things that we're producing in the coming months, we'll be talking about what do we mean by prevention. So there's a lot the NHS can do. There's a lot of good stuff in the long-term plan, but actually, primary prevention, stopping people getting sick in the first place, is way beyond the NHS's remit.
What do you think's happened to public health? Was it a good move to move public health into local government?
My own opinion is that it was, and the primary reason for that is I think within local government, public health has an influence on what we describe as the wider determinants of health. So they really influence things like housing, things like urban planning, things like education. And actually that's so important for long-term population health improvement. So, I mean, there's no perfect way to cut it up because it works across local government and the NHS, but my view is the local government is the right place for public health to sit.
Now we've got, we mustn't call them accountable care services or integrated care, whatever, blah, blah, whatever they're going to be. I think they should be called district health authorities, which is really what they are, because I used to run one of those. But that whole vertical package, where does public health fit in that?
So I think public health has a vital role in bridging that gap between the very centralised national NHS and much more local government. So I think it's a vital sort of translator between those two very different cultures, and also out into the community and into the voluntary sector as well.
I mean, if we were to try and drive this on, one of the things we could do is aim for a greater transparency, because transparency helps everything generally. Now, in New Zealand, you cite in your chapter, they've got a very interesting dashboard approach. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's fascinating what they're doing in New Zealand, because they're explicitly acknowledging that government isn't just about creating economic growth, that at the heart of everything they do should be an approach to improving human well-being. So the well-being dashboard or living standards dashboard is measuring a whole range of things, including health and economic outputs and social outputs, and that is going to be used to evaluate policies. The interesting thing for me is it's being driven by the Treasury in New Zealand.
Oh, really?
So right at the heart of government.
Self-interest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's brilliant that they're taking such an enlightened approach.
Yes.
I think the Welsh approach, the Future Generations Act it's called, I think it's a different approach, but it's a really interesting one as well, and I think Scotland's going in the same direction. And really there they've legislated to say that all policy must be evaluated against what's the impact going to be on future generations and on the well-being and health of future generations, which I think is a really interesting way of trying to get out the short-term policy making cycle that we have.
Well, a great chapter, and it's a terrific read, and like everything the Health Foundation does, it's very elegantly argued and beautifully produced. So thank you very much for talking to us about it. Great chapter.
Thank you.
You must look at it.